Hi, Cory, and we
Hello.
have a guest today who's gonna. I don't know how they identify politically exactly, but looking at some of the ideas, it sure sounds to me like Cory said to me a long time ago. That sure sounds like anarcho-socialism or communism. Excuse me, anarcho-communism, because in a sense, some of the ideas, especially the non-high authority, everyone seems to be working for the good of the other.
And see, I would argue all that is simply based on watching biology,
Right on.
because biology needs absolutely nobody to ever organize anything. We come along attempting to understand what's going on, and
Right.
because we don't have a full idea of the nested system complexity, does that, like, you understand the small scale, but if you don't understand what's going on from basically a fourth dimensional perspective, you don't see the entirety of how the system works. So it's like looking at a pyramid from the side. It looks like a triangle. You're like, oh, I see exactly how it goes to work. That's on the top, and it's on top of everything else.
Right.
Well, when you look at it with more complexity than just your first perspective, you have an entire system that is not just a hierarchy. And it's only imposed views by people where a hierarchy is ever tried to force to be in place. There are no natural. I've looked
totally
at some
agree.
of this stuff.
Even if someone could try to say that hierarchy was natural, I would say you mean that people socially organize without authority, not that somehow we always pick an authority. I mean, just like they usually don't call it authority rule, they call it mob rule, as in all the people doing stuff. There isn't an authority rule. That's just authoritarianism. People following the fucking what they're told to do. You know what I'm saying? Well, I'm just saying, even in psychology, I was just relating that because I have a degree in psychology, so I also.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I do.
I love psychology. It's if I could go back and go, oh, that's the thing I would have looked at after high school. I love psychology. I love understanding how the mind works, because it's such it's great. Yeah. It ties to everything.
I took that, and I also took sociology, also a little bit of criminology and juvenile delinquency and teaching. But most of it is psychology and sociology, with those other ones is like other stuff I did that was involved. But yeah, to me, that's helped me understand a lot of the stuff that people say, and understand, because like when you were talking about in your things about, what is, in a sense, like for me would be the highest value, or where you place value is super important. And I know that doesn't start with just figuring out how the values are placed, but what is value. And so when I was reading,
can't establish. Yes.
Sorry. I was thinking is, go ahead. I was thinking that when I was reading your stuff, that my first thought is always, what is the moral, in a sense, or social foundations of things? And then that motivates the reason why all these other things you're talking about. Because to me, a lot of what you're talking about was more, to me, leaning on how we organize a society that we've already agreed we want. And I reading it, of course, agree with a lot of things you say, because like I said, they also sound like sort of like my beliefs or my values. But before we get into all that, I wanted to go ahead and say who you are so people can know. And go ahead and say now to where they can find you, in case people want to find you, why we're talking about stuff. And then at the end, we'll also do that.
I'm just refer to me as BumblingBard42. You can find me on Blue Sky at BumblingBard42. I post my theories and rough drafts of my ideas. This is independent research. This is stuff that I think I have figured out rather well. I've spent over 20 years in factory production, and I say that because I am really good at understanding the amounts of energy or effort or efficiency that goes into making a system work the way you want it to. And on top of that, being someone who has aphantasia, which means I can't visualize any imagination whatsoever. It's like being cognitively blind. I cannot visualize anything. I say that because all systems to me, once I understand how they work, they all look the same. It's all how much I can feel the energy cost in something to go. And when things are inefficient, I can almost feel it. And I know that sounds a little silly, but that's the best way I can explain it. When something is not functioning efficiently, that's when I can feel anxiety creeping up. Like it's a reaction to the energy waste that I can. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say is like I've told Cory before, why it's to me so important about value. And I know it sounds like I always force value on it. Actually, I'm reminding everything actually is dependent upon value. In other words, if I say the most efficient, well, the most efficient thing is just to execute people at birth. And so you don't ever have to feed them. You don't ever have to have crowding, So I'm just making a comment. I'm not dogging on what your personal ideas. I'm just saying, I know that the value has to be set. Otherwise, efficiency would be that we need the fewest amount of people that we can organize socially. And I have a problem with that, because when you set the value at getting efficient when it comes to people, then removing their rights is the most efficient, really.
I am taking what you said as this is a discussion. Nobody's trying to prove anybody wrong. We're debating if there's a whole.
I don't feel like I'm debating. I'm just saying that as an axiologist, when I read anything that's making a claim, I know we need to know the values involved. Because value is what gives meaning. Like, in other words, if I say human rights, because I had an argument with an anarchist who's an egoist. And he said, I'm wrong because egoists are right about there's no such thing as human rights. For me, I just listen to that and I go, there's someone who is a fucking moron.
Fucking moron.
Moron, because to me, as an axiologist, the reason he doesn't value human rights has to be on some set of value dependent or on top of them. In other words, like saying that because the point is, he says he needs freedom, but freedom is a state of your human rights. It literally is that you have the human right to movement or of the idea. So to say that doesn't matter, but yet I want freedom or even concept of justice or whatever, all that is dependent on the value. If justice, because justice, we think of it as colloquially as some sort of thing that's this perfect, foundation we can somehow reach or get to or find or whatever. That's actually not true. Justice is a behavior we do that ratifies wrong.
I would say that justice is a constraint that we put on how we've decided to accept for society to move forward.
But see, the point is everyone doesn't accept equally. So that's what I was trying to say. You got to.
Oh, no, I agree. Because value would also be relative to the individual. So how do you decide something that's relative to the individual?
Right, and that's why I feel like the anarchist perspective does help, even though I know you didn't focus on it, is that the reason we don't do hierarchy is because the individual has value. That's why hierarchy is an assault to this, is an assault to democracy or freedom. Hierarchy is actually going against that. Even if we choose it, once it rules us, then we've removed that equality thing. That's why, to me, direct democracy, I feel, is the only kind of democracy that I could really fully support, because
each individual has to have the same value.
Yeah. Then they all have equal value. They all have equal rights. So to me, I'm just making a comment because there's some anarchists that are against democracy. But I don't know.
I get that. No, and here's the thing. I would say there's different aspects that people have that they've gotten it right. It's not all of one system. It has
Yeah,
to adjust under this circumstance. It has to adjust under that circumstance. Because then
correct.
again, yeah.
But like I've tried to tell Cory before, we have to understand people in a sense as a ecological system, that we are not by ourselves. We are automatically connected to our family or our closest friends, then the larger friends, groups or acquaintances or whatever, and then the larger, job and the society we're in, and then the state we're in, and then the world temperature or behavior that we're in. Because obviously, let's say a place in, Ukraine or in Palestine, things happening. So our world isn't just, but there's values that we put on all these, and how we operate in these values and how they operate on us all is making this difference. And so I don't disagree. That's why I felt like I read your stuff and I go, this is a different way of coming at it than I would, because I would build everything on value. And then from there, all of your conclusions would make to me more sense. Because if our value is the highest systemic value, then we should care about children the most. And
Under
then we
certain
never
circumstances.
stop caring about elderly, because they never stop until death being a full dignity being.
Well, and then you have to start deciding, okay, define value, define life, define who gets what, which life gets what value. And you either A, start letting things naturally separate the way they do in all of physics, from everything from the cosmic scale down to biological life, down to atoms themselves. They all self-organize. Why do we as humans keep trying to do something different? And I would say the key to the self-organizing isn't putting a bunch of hierarchies. I think those have a place, like you said, in emergency circumstances where there is an immediate threat and you need a quick chain of command to handle a situation, not for long-term control. It's like an ERT response, not a form of governance.
I agree. Like I said, you and me, actually, I'm not saying I disagree with you.
Yeah.
Your way of saying it is that these are all the best ways to do it. And I'm like, yes, if our value is anarcho-socialism, then yeah, you're on the money. But if you're trying to do a Democratic Party, reform type of thing, your stuff is not going to be appealing in a sense, or not be something that they would have thought of trying. Because like I know that a lot of the stuff that you're doing is, you said, like, everyone gets a certain amount of house and a certain amount of land and a certain amount of
okay, to be more specific on note, I those are more rough draft ideas. Those are saying this is a starting point. I know that it's not going to be an equivalent where everybody gets the exact same amount, because different people have different needs, because that has to be built.
I wasn't even challenging that. I'm for that. Actually, see, maybe I'm a little farther than you. I'm sure Cory's probably even a little farther left than me, but I'm pretty left. I want everybody to have a house. That's why I have people said the guillotines and stuff. For me personally, I'm an anarcho-humanist, meaning that even though even though I'm anarchist, even though it's social, I'm a humanist in that my thing should be to not produce harm and also to produce good. So I don't feel like I'm just, in other words, like some people, as long as I don't harm, I'm good enough. That is not what an anarcho-humanist would say. Anarcho-humanist says the world is bad. I need to help now.
Because I know a better way, because it is objectively more energy efficient for everybody to have their own boundaries set up by them than it is for anybody to impose boundaries on another person. So it does still go back to an energy efficient thing, if you understand that intrinsically any system has value on its own for existing as a system that can recognize it is a system. Does that make sense?
Well, but and why? Why is that the case? In other words, morally, I feel like that you're, like I said, I think you're coming to conclusions I would probably reach, but I'm not hearing how you're getting there morally. You're just saying it's more efficient, but then the immoral thing could be also very efficient. I mean, egoism, when I say egoism, anarchism is to me a crazy, ridiculous idea. It's because to me, ego is a destructive thing. And a whole bunch of people with a bunch of competing egos. What? I mean, it's just
What if it's because the ego would be a form of hierarchy, right? In other words, I don't know what's going on, so I have to control X, Y, Z, however many multiple variables you want to add. It builds in complexity. It still boils down to, and I'm sure you agree, it still boils down to somebody decided that they know better than a larger system that they don't understand, that they have to put on a hierarchy restriction. And the moment you put in a restriction on a natural organizing system, you have introduced an inefficiency because it now costs more energy to go around the barrier that you have just placed. So it still comes back down, I think, to efficiency, where an efficient system will automatically respect the boundaries of an individual, because then the self-organizing principles end up doing something like orbital mechanics.
But right, and like I said, to me, what the individual does for themselves, to me, is morals, and what they do with other people is ethics. It's a non-self related thing. In other words, what's efficient for me is to be able, if I have a sexual need, is just to rape. That's the most efficient for me personally. But
okay,
as a society, and this is I think you're making this claim, but it's a moral claim that's built on values. That's all I was trying to say. If I say the reason we all shouldn't rape is because none of us want to get raped or have the psychological trauma of someone we love to be raped, in a sense. You get what I'm saying? But that's
yes, because that would
systemic harm of rape.
Right, because that would also go down to a boundary violation. You have entered a boundary that you were not invited to. So it's like well, that's what I'm saying. It's like no, but that's what I'm saying. It still goes down to the intrinsic value comes with somebody's individual boundaries. The moment you cross those boundaries, you have implied, without being invited, a hierarchy determining the value for yourself of another system. So in order for a system to exist with its own boundaries, it fundamentally has value that way. And I know you're not really arguing that, but I say that because that's why the system existing gives it to the right to do that. And all of this is added to the fact.
Like you said, you said right. When you said it is right. See, right is like a
that's the wrong word.
Judgment, which like I said, just understand, I make tons of value judgments because that's literally what archaeology is about. It's being more consciously aware of the judgments you make, the values. I'm just like I said, it's not just when you say words, it reminds me of things. So
no, and that's right great because that's how we learn.
Good or bad, yeah, these are all valued, and it's an axiology because, of course, it's not just black or white, all good and all bad all the time. There's levels of good. And then like I told Cory one thing that axiology, and I know that you're aware of also because you talk about time. Systemically, time is also a thing. That's why
more than that, but yes,
more value because they have a long lifespan, so their thing is value. But to me, when we do it, it's who they are. You're paying attention to. Why you care about, like I said, rape again, is because it's not a momentary violation. It's a lifetime of psychological damage.
Okay. Right, because you have taken in a system as an individual, you have added an amount of information, the experience, which is going to take a specific amount of time to process. So it's not just a value of time. There is a value because information itself is, I would argue, and this is the basis of my theory, time and information are the two fundamental pieces of our existence. If you allow, I can elaborate on that to why I think that.
Well, first, I think we should, since I've talked about what your idea is, I think you should say the acronym and then say what the acronym stands for and then say what that means, like it's valid.
Okay, thank you. It little help guidance is nice. The theory I am calling is TAIRID. I'm struggling on the pronunciation myself. It is TAIRID. time and information relative in dimension. The basis of my understanding, and this is how I look at the world, is that you have, at one end of the spectrum, you have absolute zero, where you have information. That's it. There's no time, there's no motion. It is absolute zero. Information without motion. On the other end of the spectrum, you have time. Time without reference is potential of zero. One without the other is nothing. But the moment time and information intersect, you have a reference point for what I'm calling, or how I put it, structured differentiation. The moment a one-dimensional possibility interacts with a structure, time has now observed information, and information has now observed time at the same moment. So we have the first superposition, where everything now can reference off of that and collapse. And once all of time and information is in one spot, it explodes. And there we have a gradient where mostly time is more like gravity. Mostly information would be like your strong nuclear force, where you have more information than time. You build on those and you go from 1D to 2D. You now have two-dimensional forces that I am saying are like a gradient scale. And once you have a two-dimensional force from an expansion and a collapse, you have a wave function that you can now build off of. And as a wave function from 2D to 3D, you interact the forces, you get electromagnetism and light. And then when the forces interact with light, you can now build matter in 3 dimensions. And I would say this builds off of prime numbers as the stabilizing force per scale as time and information evolve dimensionally. And that brings me back to my understanding of cognition, where hierarchies are a two-dimensional version of a three-dimensional evolutionary system.
Well, I feel like you're talking about existentialism, and you're also talking about scientific world in a sense view of how quantum works or something.
Here's why all that.
But this is the problem for me. All that you said about all that stuff, you think how matter comes about and all that. How does that make me know that you have a best society? I just feel like
I would love to build off of that.
What I'm trying to say is, when I read your ideas, like the what you like, that I feel like your conclusions or your hypothesis or your offering of ideas or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those seem to have all this good stuff, but then when you explain it, how you think you got there, I don't feel like you've justified that part, because when you're talking, you're saying abstract things as if, to me, that equals like prime numbers. Prime numbers, what does numbers have to do with humans having value or not having value? What does numbers have to do with like how we should best? And like I said, when I see the stuff that you're putting, like, here's what we should do and why, I don't know that it's so against something I would be against or anything, but I'm not getting the justification of how you're starting and this stuff in a sense, because what you say there, it just sounds like you're taking a like I said, half psychology and half sort of science thing and putting them together, and then saying it relates to how math works. That for me, that would not inspire me to agree that you've come to a good system through what you said. Your claims that these things, like, so you said some really good stuff in some of the stuff, because what you would show, which is I need to know the values. You say right now there's tons of pollution. doing this would reduce pollution. See, now that rock star, that's easy to understand. And you're saying this equals this thing, or this because of this problem, this would be a good solution. That I agree with that. Or I mean, that doesn't sound unreasonable at all. And I can follow that. But when you say that time dimension and light, you know, somehow with prime numbers makes reality or three-dimensional reality or whatever, what is it? If in other words, the fact of, because I feel like that would be addressing is reality real question, like solipsism, which is a philosophy concept. Are we really here? I don't know how that relates to, like, say for me, and I told Cory this before, and it's very long, so I'm not going to go explain all of it about how I dismantle my feeling that reality is not real. But the basic is that as an axiologist, it's a value thing. So in value, understanding that is really about appreciating goodness, worth, beneficialness, you know, and so truth, accuracy, all these are all part of what an axiologist cares about, because they're all this positive stuff in a sense. So because we have a positive mindset, that's why I also, to me, the negative of that would be, say, nihilism. Nihilism is against axiology because nihilism says I don't see value, you can't understand value, or there is no such thing as value. It's all fake or whatever. But axiology, the whole world is value structures and why we're doing different things, or why one behavior is more productive than another. And I'm just saying that I feel that if you could assimilate your stuff to where we can understand as clear as you do when you say, here's the pollution, here's what cut it. You see what I'm saying? Like you said about using solar and whatever. That is, in a sense, you give it saying, like when you explain something, it should be able to somewhat follow that conclusion matters. Like I talk about all the philosophy in the world and just say, well, that relates to why I do axiology, but that's not productive for everybody else.
Well, one of the reason I bring up that is basically we have a cyclical cycle, and give me a moment to show why I think this ties to value. So you start with the cyclical cycle with a bunch of stuff compressing and then exploding. You have a wave function system beginning. And if we can calculate the beginning of everything, we have what is now an objectively accurate starting point, where anything based off of that, you can calculate where you want to go if you know where you started from. You have an objective reference point. It's the beginning of that superposition where you have, it's not saying that efficiency is,
right. So for you, when you say something is a singularity or this point, what do you mean something in science in the external world? Do you mean something in the internal world? Because these could be different things. Just like for me, and when I think of truth in a philosophy sense, it changes depending on what area or arena it's being used. In other words, when I think of reason, that's not an external thing I'm going to find lying on the ground. Cory can go to his local store and buy reason. Can't do that. You see what I'm saying? It's an internal thing. So when I explain something is reasonable, I don't always give, in a sense, anything to do with the external world, because it could be sound or make sense in it of itself. And also could be contradictory. And that's like in philosophy when they say it can't be both A and not A. That's an internal truth or a starting foundation that philosophy starts in. There's no excluded middle. That's another one in philosophy. It has to be also a thing is what a thing is. It can't be the thing is both, so the sun and also the moon.
If a thing is a thing, that's essentially saying there is objective accuracy, correct?
I agree. And that's why I said to Cory that as soon as I realized that philosophy thought that way, I immediately knew there had to be pre-logic, because how did you get to that?
Okay, so if there is objective accuracy, where's the starting point for that?
The starting point is thinking happens. then when you start ordered thinking in a methodological way, which is I see you try to do, that becomes reason.
Okay, then where does thinking come from? How do you get to thinking? What makes thinking?
What makes thinking? We have an activating event. The activating event causes emotions. Emotions cause thinking. Thinking then can be sporadic. We feel this every time we wake up in the morning. We haven't got our bearing, or you can lose your bearing while talking.
So does thinking exist in the electrical impulses in our brain or the 3D matter of our brain?
Well, those are the same thing. The 3D matter of the brain is what.
No, they're not. They are not the same thing. You can remove the electrical impulses from a person and their matter is still there. You can have all the electrical impulses and no matter, and you still don't have the person. Thinking comes from the combination.
No, that's not right. If you take away the electrical matter, you're saying you've turned the brain off.
Right.
The brain is always emoting.
That's my point. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you can't have it without both. You can't have a living person without the electricity impulses going through there. You can't have the electrical impulses without a body. Neither one of them are thinking on.
I mean, I don't understand. I never said you.
My point being that thinking comes from the combination of the electrical impulses and the 3D matter. So if you continue to work that back, how do you?
But you could have thinking removed from 3D matter. I mean, it wouldn't be a human. But you said about thinking. I mean, or the process of thinking. But
that's what I'm saying. Is the thinking comes from a very specific number of atoms, the experience of those atoms, the time it took all of those atoms to experience all the information that they've gathered. There, you can continue to work back to where objectively you started with the first fundamental thing. And you work all of that through, which means you can find an equilibrium balance of where that system can exist peacefully. And because everything is structured in the same pattern, there is a balance between all of the systems that you can find that requires no outside hierarchical force.
Well, I'm against hierarchical force because it's abusive. And
I'm saying it
doesn't allow our flourishing. I mean,
it fundamentally prevents us from evolving.
I agree.
Because it puts restrictions on our cognitive abilities. Because this also ties into, I think, neurodiversity is not a condition. It is the environments from all of neurotypes, not just ones that are diagnosed, but all of neurodiversity would be essentially the cognitive environments that our personalities would self-organize and flourish in if we remove the hierarchies.
Well, yeah, you're not going to get me to ever disagree with moving hierarchies. So.
But see, that's what I'm saying. It's because our cognition is based off of our bodies, and our bodies are based off of the matter, and the matter is based off the forces. It's all the same continuing process and of evolution. And because it is the same process, it's predictable, and there are optimal solutions where, due to the complexity, with the base being extremely structurally sound, as you build up in complexity, the top has more leeway. And that's kind of where I'm saying.
The only problem is that I still feel like it's fine to explain it that way, but I feel like when you explain it, it still sounds more like utilitarianism than it does to me like my axiology, because utilitarianism is just looking at the big good, and it doesn't really have an evaluation process.
Okay, and then to add on to that, because it's a wave function mechanic that my system is based off, you either have amplifying waves or deconstruction waves. You don't need someone to tell you good or bad. A system can resonate with another system and the waves will amplify, and you get enough of those together and they harmonize. You get enough of those and you can build a foundation.
That's like saying if we put a bunch of psychopaths in a room, they'll harmonize. Yes, they will, but it won't be for the betterment of all humanity.
I'm talking on a larger nested system, though. I'm not talking about you take a few people who are already diagnosed as ill and put them in a room and say they're going to self-organize. I'm saying humanity as a whole nested system where, like you talked about earlier, it's not just the individual. It's not just the individual and the family. It's not just the individual, the family, and the community, because then you have to add in the government, the sports affiliations, the religious affiliations, the governance, the locations. It's a nested system.
I agree. It's an ecological approach is what I have. That is how I see it. Which is a simpler way, easier to put it in the thing that they use now is called the biopsychosocial model, where it takes both the physical, like you're doing, and the psychological, and sees that's how you should see a whole person, not just through the medical.
Right. And then if we tie it back to the beginning, we've got where you've got the initial structure and possibility. Everybody is not just one thing. Intelligence isn't just an IQ score. It is an evolving system, right?
Well,
you've got somebody who has...
Personally, also, I think of, which is called the multi-intelligences. Like, there's not one, like drawing is a type of intelligence. Singing, Cory doing, his show could be a type of intelligence,
Information being processed over time. That's intelligence, isn't it?
Well, if someone is processing it, I don't think that time does anything. Time is just an event that we categorize.
That's what I said. Time is the possibility. Everything that happens between time and information is what we're basically discussing. Because if time and information are the initial event, everything is just a balancing act between them as a differentiation equation balancing.
So what would you say is the most important thing that you want people to think about from what you have put together?
Essentially, that from a production standpoint, as most people have had access to how it's made for decades now, from a production standpoint, humanity can produce more than what we need by far. People just need to understand exactly how we can do that. And I would argue that someone who has had production for 20 years who can say, this is how long it takes to produce this. And if you remove all the management money restrictions, this is the most energy efficient way to produce enough food and ingredients for everybody. And we can produce so much on a local level that nobody has to sit and go, well, I wanted this, because we can make any environment we want to do vertical farming with hydroponics and calculating the actual needs of what's done if you remove the monetary restrictions that we place on stuff. It's a simple production line. If we just produced basic needs, every person on this planet would have more than what they need.
Well, yeah, and I personally feel we should, like I said before to Cory, my personal feeling is a society that's they call civilized, right? To me, should be one that doesn't allow poverty, allow homelessness. Now, and I don't mean like as a nowadays in America where you like.
No, you're talking real solutions.
That's not how you fight homelessness. You give them a house. Like, how do you fight lack of education? We should educate people. I think education should be free. How is it not more productive than war? More education, all of us.
And this is where I struggle, because I'm like, this is technically why it works. It's just, this is how, once you know how, everything follows. And that's where I think I can admit my own limitations, but it still boils down to if all the basic needs are taken. If all the basic needs are taken care of, then that's how you build the complexity. So it really boils down to an efficiency thing. The best way to do more with less energy is to build in complexity. The best way for humanity to do more is to feed all the basic things. That's why for me it boils down to an efficiency thing as the shortest amount, least amount of resources, least amount of energy to accomplish what we both agree is there, and it's based off of my theory is how I get there.
Right. And so I would just say, to me, your theory is like trying to come up with justifications for how we build the society like I said, and to me, your values are that we should build a just, a caring, a equal, but I'm just making a comment. Those are all inherent, like presupposition beliefs in the fact of saying that doing this that everyone could eat is a good thing. I agree. I mean, but the reason is that there's a value that you used to get to that. It's a good thing.
And the way I get there was system integrity. A system deserves to exist on its own because that's how it evolved, and that system can be.
So, and how are for you are ants equal? Like, should
Okay.
we? Right. So should we allow termites to eat our walls because it's most efficient for life, for housing, for us both to be getting benefit? In other words,
and I agree.
I'm getting benefit because I live there, and the termites are getting benefit from eating my walls.
And that's a very fair question, because then do you get to decide, well, because I am smarter than the termite? How do you determine intelligence? Well, we've already agreed that intelligence is not just a measured number. It has to be something more complicated than that, which means you can take and understand how much information a system or creature or person is actually able to process. You can determine where someone's ability to process self-awareness is possible. Just like you can't necessarily, you're not going to be able to run VR on an Apple II unless you've done something to the Apple II or adjusted the VR. It's a matter of complexity that the system can't handle self-awareness until a certain point.
Right. And so how I would put it for my understanding is the reason we're different and should care about us more than an ant is because psychologically we're designed that way. If Cory doesn't care for his child and his child dies and he saves an ant, I guarantee Cory's going to suffer for the rest of his life that he did that. Maybe even want to commit suicide, may even do other self-harm behaviors simply because of this. We cannot get outside it. We are emotional, psychological beings that then have all these experiential things and these systems we're in. But the thing that is in this system is an emotional being. Now, an ant should care the most for other ants, and they do. They literally save other ants, but that is correct. And so, in other words, Cory's value to his partner should be more than it is for Damien. This is not illogical. In my system, I'm just saying, because it puts the value responsibility on the person doing the ethical things. Who is the one that is doing these moral, questions or issues or whatever, solving these or involved in them? The moral agent, in other words. So to me, I always think about that. And what society is a group of moral agents. All of us are doing this. And so that's why, to me, and like I said, I really liked your stuff. I just felt like I would have added more of the justification. But if you cut that out and just said, here are some great options of how to make a society like, an anarchist socialist society to operate in its most efficient, dude, your stuff is good. It's not, you get what I'm saying? I think that you have a whole bunch of great ideas. I
would be the first one to admit that I don't have enough people working with me.
Well, and that's why I was willing also to hear, other ideas. I think that we're better together. I think that that's why when someone said, shouldn't the most wise be the one to lead? I'm like, no, we should have wise people that offer ideas, and then we look and we vote on them. And, so in direct democracy, not forced on anybody.
Right. But it boils down to, how does anybody determine anything? It's all self-referential. You have to say, this is what I understand. This is what you understand. We have to come to an understanding where you understand how I understand it, and I understand it how you understand it. Then we can make an informed choice.
Speaking of which, did you get to check out any of my blogs and see my ideas?
I did see some of the stuff. I liked the stuff on the axiological stuff where it was a step-by-step. That really caught my interest, because from my perspective, I really like it because I think that's close, and then there's just a little bit more to it. the history part of stuff, I didn't really get too much into it because if I'm not mistaken, it was about like the religious and evolving through history and the different why it's like, yeah, I was able to check out
Just
some
so you
of
know,
those
the
things.
reason I focus so much on that was actually so I want to remove the myths so we can move on to like reality. And
Yes.
Like a lot of atheists say, "Oh, religion's wrong," but if people don't feel comfortable that, like, well, we don't really know, so I felt like someone needs to go look so we know.
Well, and religion just forces hierarchies for at one point could have been helpful, but are no longer helpful because they are causing more harm than good. They are collecting entropy and causing inefficiencies.
Well, I also feel, me personally, they violate our human rights that other anarchists
100%. Yes.
we don't have. Like, okay, whatever. But it's like nihilists when they say there's no value. I said, but you value that you think there's no value. So, and they go, no, I don't. I go, right, because you don't do any efforts to promote, as you said, nihilism. But why would you promote something you don't feel has value? I mean, like, get out of here. I feel like they're just sophistry in a sense. It sounds good.
Well, I think a lot of
actually think about it, it's really not good.
Well, I think a lot of people they don't understand the full sense of harm because we've set so many aspects of society to be a blinder from the people who live on the outside of the accepted standard society.
Oh, yes.
Like as in, well, yeah, religion is just fine. Well, yeah, did you go talk to all the people who were harmed by it? Take a country where some what's the term where they go over there? Missionary going over there and being like, well, we're going to bring God. Well, what are you, no, you're not. You're forcing hierarchy. You're not sharing anything. Well, they're doing so much better based on your predefinition of what it should be, not what is objectively accurate.
Well, and speaking of which, too, one of these times me and Cory are going to do a blog about how Papua New Guinea is actually one of the worst rape places in the world now, and also relates to witch hunting. They like torture, sometimes rape these people, and do witch hunting, hit them in the head with machetes and shit. It's fucked up.
Oh my God.
What's really fucked up is it wasn't like that really until Christianity with their sexism and their demon possession and all that came.
There's a whole lot of that once you start yes, I'm not saying every ancient culture was all roses, but there's a whole lot of that.
This one actually, we can define it legitimately got more toxic once we added Christian. There was
one of the I was going to say one of the papers I did recently, because it was about the history and the cycle back and forth where you have basically, and religion was part of it through structured differentiation, where you have this is the society, this is early on, and then you have art coming along saying these boundaries don't make sense. Then you have another society, it's more complex. We're going to put in a few more guidelines, a few more boundaries. Religion, this is where God is, this is what good is. And then you have art coming along saying, hey, are these boundaries real? To where you have structure from science, math, religion, and governance in the same interplay with art trying to constantly remove those boundaries so society can actually move forward. And it was just the history of it. I was really surprised at how much it really does go to where the events of history and what was going on with technology and how we were expressing science and math. Art always went to deconstructing those boundaries that math and science had just set up, which had led us to knowing more specific math and science and helping us grow.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting how, for me, because someone said, oh, well, a lot of people there were, famous people were religious. And I'm like, yeah, well, religion to me, after understanding like I do, you understand there was like a kind of a cosmology, like a view of the world that passed around a lot of the earth. And so that's why a lot of the earth has these similar things. They interpret it differently, but it really isn't that different.
Well, it's like the different pyramids. It's like, well, why are pyramids all over the? Well, it's because it was a structurally sound geometric structure that people learned and built off of.
Well, and
Like
also,
that's
if you watch my videos, I have videos explaining this. It's
well,
also
and all,
religious based because if
yeah,
they
yeah.
believe, like in Egypt, they had, before the pyramid, they had this thing called a mastaba, and they used to put a little mound of creation inside, and then
Mm-hmm.
later, the top of the pyramid is considered the mound of creation. And this
Right.
has to do with their religion, but it also, the mound of creation relates to why the Sumerians did their temples, and the mound of creation, kind of a turtle and sky, relation, deity stuff, relates to why Native American did their mounds or pyramids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there is this huge thing. But so yeah, my thing really, and I also was interested in the social structures, like at the same time that the first mace head about 12,000 years ago, that's in the same place is that slavery starts. So forced authority and slavery are at about the same time, almost in the same
Yep.
area. They probably
Exactly.
each other. I mean, but then you see that that went from the Middle East, right? It goes through Turkey and with R1B V88. See, I even know which DNA. It goes up into Ukraine area between the Draper and Dorset rivers, Draper-Dorset culture. And that's when, as soon as they get up there, they get up about 9 to 8,000 or 8,500 to 8 something. Sometime around 8,000 is when the mace heads just become explosion in Ukraine. And everybody starts all this dominance, and the culture starts like just a little tiny thing and then massively expands. Eventually that becomes the Yama later, and the Yam about 5,000, because this is at 8,000 or whatever, and to 7,000. But that 5,000, then it becomes Yama, and that becomes all of Europe. It becomes most of the languages. It's Swedish, Norwegian, German, French, Italian. It is English, Welsh. It's Irish. It's all this comes from this one thing. And they all take, like you were saying about hierarchy, they all take hierarchy with them. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to know that I understand religion like as a whole picture.
Yeah.
Hierarchy is not inherent to religion. In other words, like the animism is maybe almost anti-hierarchy, because they actually think even children and everybody has rights compared to, in a sense, when totemism is the first time somebody is passing authority, and then clans are structured relatively hierarchical,
Mm-hmm.
as extensions of almost a family hierarchy, but it's still kind of a hierarchy. But when it first started, it was both some negative and some not. And then shamanism evolved from animism, thus anarchist in a sense,
Right.
separately in Siberia, and the other one formed in France and Germany, and then they came together in Austria, and then from then on, it was one unit, but it was varied of these two perspectives, totemism and shamanism. And shamanism, totemism as a unit goes to Siberia on the way, halfway in Russia, before it goes fully to Siberia. It looks like to me more sexist, or maybe more controlling of women, because they look
More
like
hierarchical.
hands tied to their hierarchy, probably have their hands tied to their thing. And it's the first time there's male figurines and female figurines that are like totem pole looking things. They're small, but I mean, they're like sticks.
Right.
Everybody else before, like, they think about Europe and the figurines are fat and whatever. No, these are not. And then
Somebody had to do a prototype first.
Exactly, right. Then you see that go to Siberia, and then kind of become a little more probably feminine centric compared to Russia, that looked like it was abusive maybe to feminine. But
Mm-hmm.
it's forever kind of a imbalance, I feel, just
Mm-hmm.
from 24,000 years ago. Then 22,000 years ago, these people from Siberia go all the way into the Middle East, R1B. They go in the Middle East and take over, and they start doing agriculture and all this stuff, and more things, and then that eventually by 12,000, when of course R1A comes in at 12,300. So R1B had already been there since 22 and also had gone into Europe by 14, but and then went to Africa by 8,000. But anyways, but by the time that R1A comes in at 12,300, that is almost the time, like I said, 12,000, and then you have the mace heads and authority, and then you have slavery. So I don't know. It could just be people came in and more stuff. They could have maybe brought it. Anyways, my point is, so I feel like at 12,000, the agriculture religion turned shamanism into paganism. Early paganism to me was totemism, animism, shamanism with gods, in a sense. So to me, there's a whole structure of how it happens. And I think from paganism, it's already a stronger structure, because I think the fact of having a god, or what you would call a great spirit, means that the other spirits are hierarchically lesser.
Yep.
Right? Did you get what I'm saying? So
yeah, exactly. It's built into it. The hierarchy built into the hierarchy.
So right, so you realize, oh wow, and this is the same. So I think that animals probably came first, and they probably were kind of protector. Females come next at 10,000.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That? Yeah,
no, I'm agreeing with you. Yes.
Like dogs, because if you look at Göbekli Tepe, there's the people figure with this like jumping like fox dog or something, and I know that area tried to domesticate foxes, did that domesticated dogs. So this behavior, and also Siberia, they would kill a dog by spearing it through its body and hang it outside the camp as a belief to wear off in the spiritual realm, in a sense, wear off.
Right.
So I think that behavior, protection sort of thing, turned into a deity. It wasn't a deity exactly, but it was a spirit that would go help you, like Coyote.
Well, it's like religion. Religion was an emergent property of our misunderstanding of what the world, what was going on in the world. They were trying to make sense of it.
Absolutely.
So each version, just like you described, each version that you described is like it put up another boundary for what this unknown God was, right? And then they just kept building off of it until we're with this warped version of understanding, because it's all those nested systems.
Correct. So that's what I was saying. So it starts in animals, then it turns to female, and still it had elements of now both sort of a bad god and a good god in a sense. So it was less than the animal who was just our protector in a sense. Although animals were also considered tricksters, and tricksters is the thing of being both good and bad. So I think that the first ones kind of become that because they already had this mythology. Because they're trying to explain nature, like you said. Sometimes the sun is great, and sometimes it burns everything alive. Sometimes rain is wonderful, and then there's also floods.
It's kind of like a built-in cultural understanding of a superposition between structure and possibility that is a constant play back and forth.
Right. So they're wrong, and I think that they were also building for their needs. Their other need was to have a protector animal because there's wild nature. Then when they got agriculture, they need to have a protective sun and a protective moon to basically, they think, organize their plants or whatever to flourish better. So they start having these different opinions. So at first, it's still beneficial because it's giving, right? We're begging, but it's giving something. Then later, the God thing, the male God, I feel, happens somewhere between 8,000 and 7,000. Because by 7,000, male clans take over the world. What I consider.
And I love what you're saying. Sorry, I'm just excited.
Yeah, so when the male clans take over between 7,000 and 5,000, there's a drop of male DNA to where it's one man for every 17 to 15 women. So they literally kill all the men to get all the women in a sense.
Yep.
But that shows, like you said, hierarchy. Someone is doing that, because also it's not like every man gets 17 women. It was probably like one guy gets 300 and a few other elites get a couple, and the other ones maybe they get, maybe they don't.
See, how is this not like the exact, if you follow our understanding of society, right? Our source of food was animals. So our first
Right.
gods were animals. Our
Right.
first source of the next after animals was fertility and growth. Therefore, we went for women and growth.
That's
Then
right. That's correct.
hierarchy always self-consumes. A hierarchy is unnatural. Increasing complexity or understanding automatically shows that the hierarchy can't work. So the only way for the hierarchy to work is to consume more to sustain itself. Any
Right.
hierarchy will always lead to a collapse because it doesn't allow for self-organization and adaptation.
Right. So what happened is after the 7,000 to 5,000, from 5,000 down is state. So these clan leaders just turn into, in a sense, like a pharaoh is considered to be both king and spiritual leader. So that's they call them priest kings in a sense in Samaria.
They're evolving.
Right, they're
A
evolving.
priest was
So
not enough.
From clan to and priest are separate. Then all of a sudden, those go together, and they call that king, who is in charge of both the religion and the thing. And this is to me when I think that when people think of religion fucking forcing culture or forcing rules, I think it's after 5,000 that really becomes apparent because the king
because
is now
they've cut out so many.
And so if you ever look, a lot of religions do this similar thing that's pretty fucked up. They all think kings are great. They all think that these needs to happen. That it's that natural.
It reinforces the hierarchy.
Oh, totally. So I'm just saying is they're doing this. So, but who's making the rules? Well, the priest king makes the rules. Of course he thinks he's the best. If you ask Donald Trump, is he the best? He ain't going to say he's not the best. How about Elon Musk? He also feels he's the best. These people up to, their own
and this is why the hierarchy leaders always fail. The more complex the hierarchy gets, the further they are from the edge of society. They're away from the boundary of the thing they're controlling. There's no longer any coherence through the entire system. That's why it will always fail, because he's going to start making decisions and he's not going to have information in time to react accurately without destroying the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
I was saying is, so I see it as this whole process that happened where, and then I also feel that in this same time, it's about 7,000 years ago that I think personally the seeds or the earliest parts of what becomes later capitalism is already occurring. You already have some people that have because I showed him this, the linear back pottery culture in Germany, that you can see that some like a big house, right, has like 2 yards, one on each side. There's other houses that don't have 1 yard, and there's other houses that just a house and no yard fenced. And then there's other people with small little houses and nothing. And just you know what I'm saying? So you look at that and you're like, I'm seeing inequality.
Well, I wrote a paper about the ratio of power, and it goes back basically saying for 6,000 years, we've been ruled by 5% of all humanity. 5% of people have decided for everybody, which is absurd. And the only solution to that is for everybody to have their basic needs working together to say, we don't need anybody to be in charge, because that's where we overlap with.
But I was going to say, even if we did, this is why I feel it's just from people don't get this, that even if we did, let's say we needed a state like some of the authoritarians need, that's also never produced well-being.
Nope.
I mean, so if the goal, like you said, that's what I was trying to say about the value. If the value is actual well-being, that's never an option. You can't go with the hierarchy. That's never. I already know psychologically that hierarchy causes disruption in the lower ranks. Of course, how could it not?
So the hierarchy is always inefficient, and the inefficiencies build up and collapse the system.
Yeah.
Actually, without even assigning value to anything, the inefficiencies alone cause a hierarchy to collapse.
Well, if you understand axiology, when you say the word inefficiency, that is an axiological claim judgment that you've made. I'm not saying it's inaccurate. I'm just saying,
and I agree. Yes, I love your pedantic catching. I honestly do, because you can't be objectively right if somebody can pick apart what you've put together.
Right. Well, and I wasn't even, like I said, picking it apart. I'm trying to show you that there's always this inherent thing to what you're saying. When you say good, bad, truth, lies, all these are our judgments. I'm not saying they're inaccurate, but they need to have a value system to structure.
An energy cost is not good or bad. That is an objectively accurate thing. So if something is an
energy cost, when you say cost, and you say cost is a good amount or a reasonable, like say a cost, right? So if it costs like a 300 for a car, or costs 3,000 for a car, it would be certainly better to have a lower cost, but that doesn't make a better car.
No, and so, but when you talk to
efficiency would be when you talk about money and get better results, but that's not actually how it always works. Sometimes you need to have more. It's like involvement. People in society would like to not be involved. Like say they don't want to listen to us talk, right? Or even to read through your ideas. People actually are pretty lazy. That is something we have to do. So to me, understanding what makes people do things is because they see the value in it. When they realize, oh, wait a minute, my human rights are violated, not just trans people, like in Donald Trump's rules. That actually, even if it was just trans people, this is what people don't grasp. If you can sit there and be okay while a member of society is losing human rights, you are not respecting your own human rights, which have to do with all of us agreeing you have them. All of us behaving as if all of ours matter. You can't go, well, not these ones. It's just fucking ludicrous.
Right, it's absurd.
And I don't mean psychologically damaging just to the trans person, not even just society, but all of us. Because our humanity,
it's a trans version, it's enemy,
right? Your efficiency.
It's the nested system. Sorry, go ahead. There's a slight lag, I guess, and I keep trying to jump in.
Well, look, you know what? You notice it doesn't bother me because as an anarchist, I actually don't need it to be perfect.
Well, due to, I honestly, right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, because to me, a good conversation is one where you lose yourself in the conversation. It reminds me
because you're just worried about talking, right?
Well, in group counseling, they have this thing called storming, norming, performing. Performing is where you actually get healed in a sense, or you feel better, right? And you know you're performing when you forget that you're in here. When all of us are talking, we forget that we're talking and we just are in the moment. That's performing.
Right.
So when we formed is when we tell each other, oh, and we feel anxiety. Oh, maybe Damien will be mean to me. Maybe Cory doesn't like Damien. Maybe I'm not going to be able to talk or be given a chance or something. But once you move past that forming and norming, forming is you're trying to figure it out. Norming is okay. Now we know what the rules are or how we kind of both behave or whatever. Right? Then you just
I love it.
Where you kind of throw ideas out and you test each other. And then you do performing and you forget that you're doing all of that and you're in the moment.
So it's back to structure and possibility. You're throwing out stuff out there to see what you can build with. And then once you have some sort of built, you go back to the same process of building structure, finding possibility, learning something new, building on the old structure and going from there. Essentially evolution.
Yes. And I feel that in a sense, reason to me is a revolutionary process because it requires its user at some point to make a change that is not done because they like it, but because it is the most reasoned thing to do.
Exactly. I'll agree with that completely.
Right. So that's because and why it's revolutionary is because we're selfish, like the egoist would say, and we want to not do that. We don't want to actually have to admit we're wrong. We don't want to actually change.
But in the long run, if we admitted all the problems, things that are less efficient, and we did the efficient thing, took care of basic needs, then we would essentially actually have more time. which is the thing that I think people struggle with. It's like, no. It's not ever taking away from you. If we pooled everything, did a production flow where you can efficiently use resources, everybody ends up with so much more. I just think most people don't even understand how it's possible because of all the different religious and governance restrictions on people's thought alone. Because of all those restrictions, they can't even imagine something that could work.
Oh, I totally agree. They can't even imagine. This is what's so funny. They can't even imagine, even if in America nothing changed except we did direct democracy for all of our stuff, they can't even imagine that. That is beyond them.
Yep.
Just thought to not have rulers. It's just, I talk
like
to people all the time.
It's like trying to teach calculus to the third grader who just figured out that you can multiply numbers. It's not that the third grader is dumb. They just literally can't comprehend it because nobody has built their understanding up to something more complex beyond the simple restricted structures.
Right, and that's also why, to me, I don't really buy that like someone's IQ is the only thing that matters. I just because there's so many other factors. Like, am I intelligent because I know things? Do I know things because I'm intelligent?
This is where I say intelligence is a system because intelligence is pattern recognition.
I think the thing is, it's both. Values are both given and taken all the time. That's why when people say, like, well, do you say you study value? Do you also study like disvalue or bad things? Well, of course, they're both involved. That's like saying I'm only going to look at the one side of a coin. That's it. You know, like what?
Right. If you don't go inside to the boundaries of that thing, you won't be able to tear it apart and understand how it works.
No. And I do want people to understand. I'm going to do a blog and try to put some of your ideas or whatever, you know, in the blog. You know, I'll cut and paste some of your stuff or whatever and say where they can get it in links. But,
thank you.
Bro, because I do feel like you do have stuff worthy of, you know, being considered. Like I said, my thing is I feel like what you seem best at is explaining what we do after everyone's already assumed all these things. So in a sense, I think it's great. What I feel like, to me, I was trying to say is I feel like what your value is you've offered solutions to problems we're going to need to deal with. And I would say that's the most value for me that you offered. Not so much that you're explaining at the beginning, but some of your ideas, like I said, I feel like it's really good for real world values. You say
no, my explanations get jumbled, and I appreciate the way you just worded that. Please continue. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that it's and that's all I was trying to say too. Even if someone didn't like your stuff, I think it would be an error to say that you don't have stuff of value. You absolutely do. I think you have some absolute great ideas of what we could do. Like I said, I just feel like it's something that already assumes, like I said, the easy way to explain it is an anarcho-socialist worldview, and then goes, and now we'll solve all these problems. So
because you have to get from where we're at, you have to evolve basically where we're at to where we want to go. Like, we know where we want to go, and we understand the restrictions that we have now, and the only way to get there is either to build a system above and bypass them, or dismantle them.
Well, I'm
absolutely in for the. I want to do the mushroom route where you don't have to fight. You just let the mushrooms come in. They dissolve all the barriers, and then they redistribute all the resources, and everybody as an ecosystem moves forward.
Well, and that's why, to me, like even though I'm a revolutionary, I also agree with mutualism. I need help now. The revolution may be in 1,000 years, 100 years, 50 days. I have no fucking clue. I do know that people need help right now.
Absolutely.
I've donated my time to help the homeless. I've donated my time to help, inner city children. I helped children in an orphanage. I've helped give money and gone and fought for homeless and for people that are LGBTQI or whatever.
I did see your post in front of Chick-fil-A. I appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm just making a comment. Some people feel like it's all about theory. I got lots of theories, but I am also a socialist. We need to help now. We shouldn't be waiting for any fucking revolution. I feel like there's two ways to do the I want the revolution. One is it just fucking happens. The other one is we basically eat the fucking system from the inside out. And I don't mean like the Democratic Party. I'm talking about create systems of non-hierarchy now. Go out and be a good human now.
But how do you do here's the thing. How do you do that when you're restricted by being a part of the system? So many people, they're like, well, I would love to go. Oh my God, if I go out, I'm not going to make my house payment. If I don't make my house payment, these 3 kids don't eat. If these 3 kids don't eat, I can't do anything. Yes, everything is bad. I'm tired of people getting hurt. But if I go out, I'm hurting my kids. Like the system itself has set it up to where they're trapped from fighting until somebody destroys their home. I would argue the solution to that.
I feel like it's more important for me because I put myself in danger, knowing that I might die, I might suffer, I might lose everything, and the cause is that worth it?
Right, but what do you tell the person who can't risk their child's health to go out and revolt right now? Is that person inherently wrong, or are they just in a shitty situation?
Right well, personally, I feel we shouldn't revolt right now, even though that would be fun. But
yes, okay.
Sense, I don't think because I feel like if you
there's no support structure
on the same page of value. See, there's people that feel that Luigi, right? He killed the I think that's his name, right?
The CEO, the healthcare guy.
He killed the healthcare guy, right? So my feelings are probably not the same as every anarchist or every socialist or every, regular person, whatever. I feel it is a murderer killed a mass murderer. That is how I feel. The act of shooting someone fucking from behind is fucking murder. The fact that
it's the trolley problem.
Who he killed is a mass murderer to me. So it's kind of a quandary. How bad should I feel for a mass murderer fucking dying? If someone killed Hitler or fucking even Trump or whatever, how fucking bad would I, or Netanyahu, how fucking bad would I feel? I would not fucking feel bad.
Nope, not at all.
I don't support
that. That's just objectively accurate.
Or Putin. I mean, it would not fucking bother me that much. I don't think we should do that, but if it happened, I would not be.
And again, and every single one of these authoritarians are trying to restrict people from existing the way they naturally were born. And that's the thing. It's not a matter of, well, it's moral. And no, these are people who have decided that other people who were born for being born is not enough for them to live.
Or like I said, have equal human rights.
That's what I'm saying. They should have the right to live equally. Yes.
Well, exactly. And none of the places, in the world that the shit is happening is it, people's rights being, put forefront. But to me, even the places that we feel are doing the right thing are not really doing the right thing. America's certainly not doing the right thing. Canada's not doing the right thing. And the whole world seems to be slowly sliding into fucking far-right authoritarian and bullshit. So that's why I'm saying is, although we probably need to fight against that, I'm saying as a revolution. In other words, if we build our revolution out of violence, that's not going to end up getting to ethics.
Violence begets violence?
I'm just making a comment. If we don't have an ethical nature, in other words, the reason we should stop the system it is now is because it hurts people. Hurting people to try to get that done, I don't feel is the counteractive way we should be doing it. Because think of this, like in Tenement Square, just making a comment. The person stands in front of the tank just don't move.
Right.
I don't think that it just like the feeling that violence is the only way. Because I feel like in a sense, a hierarchical system or a capitalist system, they promulgate that. They want this sort of imbalance and force and violence
they can't function if we're not.
I'm an anarchist. Fascism is not how I fucking organize anything, is what I'm trying to say. And to say that, well, fascism for a little while, Damien, will be okay and will eventually become anarchism, I just feel like you're not really understanding things.
No, fascism is the emergent property of hierarchical systems. Every moment that they put saying this is that or that, I'm deciding for you because you don't get to decide on yourself, increases the likelihood or speed at which the system itself will collapse.
Well, and that it also would be why I don't like, in a sense, authoritarian state communism, because I don't feel that we know you have no choice. It still
centralizes control. Yep.
Like, what the fuck? So to me, like I said, I'm not against people being leaders, but to me, I consider myself a servant leader. Meaning, what would
the best system be? The best system would be. Oh, go ahead.
As a servant leader, I'm just saying it's kind of thing. I am not doing it for ego. I am not doing it for money. I'm not doing it for power, fame, anything. I'm doing it because I'm doing all this. I want to help people be in power. I want to change the fucking world.
Yes, because this is wrong.
That's what I mean by servant leader. I'm not trying to like take over and be a leader to for any kind of self-gain. I want to make a difference. And so to me, positive leaders that are not trying to be hierarchical or not trying to be are what we need. We do not need more power leaders.
Because what any system, any good leader would make the system that doesn't require a leader. These are the decisions. This is the decision I made when I was in control. These are all the reasons why I made it. This is how I came to this conclusion. This is everything. Now, everybody else can do what I can do. It should never be, well, I'm the one who makes that decision, so you need to come to... Fuck that. Fuck that all the way off. It needs to be...
I totally agree.
Everything needs to be decentralized.
Teach how to do things instead of just doing them.
Pattern recognition. Someone has to understand why this thing fits into this way. Why does the system always seem to expand and contract in this manner? Well, it's because that's how systems work. You can't expect something different if you're doing the same thing that 18 other people have done. And I think, every hierarchy has been the same, trying the same thing over and over. Well, that system wasn't working, so I need to be in charge on this step up higher. Okay, well, the next guy comes up, he goes 3 steps higher. Guys, you're all still on the same fucking staircase.
Well, and you see that even when you torture people, even when you kill people, you eventually get overthrown or you eventually die, and then someone else just stops doing your shit.
One of my favorite...
There has never been an ultimate thing that lasted really forever. I mean, that's just nonsense.
My favorite Doctor Who episode is The Invasion of the Zygons, where the Doctor has a conversation about, okay, cool, what do you do for the next revolutionary? What do you do for the next person after that? What do you do when you've gotten everything the way you want and someone comes up behind you and says, well, I want to do it differently now? How do you handle the next revolution or the next revolution? Every single thing always comes down to, I have to sit down and explain my part. You have to sit down and explain your part, and then we can come to an agreement. The fighting is just the part that you go through before you have to fucking sit down and talk. And I think if we work well, we can get past the fighting, like you said, and we can get to the point where, like, why do all these people have to die before we sit down and talk about equality?
Well, and like I said, I feel equality is an inherent thing. It's part of my morality. There is no such thing as somehow outside of that. And so to me,
agreed.
So to me, but I wanted to hear what Cory, after you know me and you've heard his ideas or us talk, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, after a set of night shifts that I just had, I don't have too many thoughts.
You know what? That proves the system, right? To make you so exhausted and tired, you actually can't do the function and you need to.
Yeah.
And that's, I agree, because I've got to work my job, and it's really hard to work on my job and then have energy to think about something better than the system that I'm forced to participate in.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
As long as people stay busy, they can't think of something better, essentially. Capitalism.
Well, And I appreciate you coming on and telling us, your ideas and us discussing. I had a good time. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Go ahead and tell people again a little bit about you, where they can find you or whatever.
I am BumblingBard42. You can find me on Blue Sky at BumblingBard42. I am trying to share my ideas on my TAIRID theory, which is time and information relative in dimension. It's how I come to the conclusions of the writings that I share. Reach out to me. My DMs are open. I'd be happy to talk about any of my ideas with anybody who wants to have an honest discussion.
Right on. All right, Cory, tell us about you and where to find you.
Sure. It's just the skeptical leftist all over the place. That's the YouTube channel, interviews and book reviews with my co-host Johnston. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, everyone, take care and see you later.
Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, antitheism, antireligionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion.